Hello, and welcome to Creating a Next Generation Supply Chain, enabling your team with supply chain analytics. I'm your host, Helen King. Companies that drive their supply chain forward to sense and respond with cutting-edge analytics will be better positioned to adapt to changing marketing conditions and customer needs. The journey to self-enablement begins today. On today's broadcast, we will discuss the supply chain looking ahead to 2030, the impact of deploying powerful supply chain analytics in your business today, and how Ames is responding to these future needs. Today's speakers will be Chris Gordon, Ames Vice President, North America, Lora Cecere, Founder and CEO of Supply Chain Insights, and Christian Olsen, Head of Business Development at Hoig Autoliners. At this time, I'm happy to introduce Lora Cecere, Founder of Supply Chain Insights.
Thank you so much, Helen, and I'm excited to talk with Christian and Chris today about a different way of thinking about supply chain optimization. I think so often people buy technology, but maybe the data model doesn't work, or maybe they haven't really stepped back to think about, are they driving the outcomes they want? And the case study that Christian's going to talk about, I think, is really an inspiring one of how the company has taken optimization software and driven new value. I'm going to set the stage, turn it over to Christian, and then ask Chris some questions. So I have been an industry analyst for over 15 years, and I've written many case studies. Many of you may read my blog, Supply Chain Shaman. And I believed that over the last 2 decades that we had implemented supply chain optimization and improved inventory and also driven improvement in operating margin. However, when I printed the balance sheets of the 600 companies I worked with, I did not find this to be the case. I found that what many times had happened is that companies had implemented technology but weren't necessarily using it. And often had found that the out-of-the-box packaged approaches didn't actually fit the business need, and they hadn't tailored the optimization to be able to drive the outcomes. So as a result, what I found was only 12% of companies' public statements are actually showing improvement at the intersection of inventory turns and operating margin for the period of 2010 to 2016. So why is it that only 12% are making progress? For most companies, when we ask them, are their supply chains working well, about 1 in 3 say that their supply chains are working well, and then the others are saying there's a lot of room for improvement. Their supply chain is cautious and reactive, and it's traditional. So one of the things we wanted to do was to find out what made a difference between companies that believed that their supply chains were working well and companies that felt that their supply chains were not working so well. So in a cross-company study at a 90% confidence level, we found that there were 5 factors that drove a difference. The first was executive understanding of the supply chain, that it's a complex system that requires optimization. The second was supply chain visibility, the ability to see what matters and to be able to do something about it. Third was organizational change management, to become data-driven and to blow up the Excel ghettos within the company, to be able to look at empowered analytics. The fourth was cross-functional alignment and the ability to actually move across the company and source, make, and deliver together. And the fifth was the ability to access and use data, data-driven answers and outcome. And these 5 factors together made a difference between companies that had a supply chain that wasn't working well to one that was working well. And we find that the correlation to companies that are driving higher levels of value on the balance sheet comes to really rethinking analytics. So the traditional view of analytics was, I'm going to take this basket of acronyms, CRM, SRM, APS, PLM, ERP, and I'm going to put them together and I'm going to implement them and good things are going to happen. But unfortunately, the acronym-based landscape doesn't often have the optimization and modeling that you need across the applications, and often the modeling that comes out of the box with advanced planning doesn't fit your need. So as we think about new forms of analytics, we think about, moving from descriptive analytics, the ability to view, to predictive analytics, the ability to model in traditional statistical ways of linear optimization, stochastic optimization, genetic algorithms, to prescriptive analytics, to be able to look at, what should we do about something? So something that is more in real-time business decision-making, to cognitive analytics, that we're starting to see the evolution of forms of insights. And the Ames solution is on that agenda from predictive to prescriptive analytics. And Christian today is going to talk about a case study that he has actually applied the Ames technology to be able to drive higher value. Now, when we think about planning and we think about the use of data, we can't just think about one application. Instead, we have to think about the entire portfolio, and we have to think about the time horizons. And no one company has the same time horizons, but it's useful, I think, as we think about the evolution of predictive to prescriptive and cognitive analytics, to actually think about time horizons and the current maturity levels of your organization and where you might be able to add optimization to existing applications to improve it. This is actually a study I did with a real client who will remain nameless, where I looked at how well was that company using their advanced planning solutions. The company had 7 ERP systems, not unlike many of you on the call, and they were trying to get to better decision making. But what they found was that many of the advanced planning tools that they had implemented, the data models didn't quite meet their business for certain business elements, and they hadn't really thought about implementation of more advanced analytics to fine-tune the outcomes. And they were not any different than most, right? When we look at the research, demand management or S&OP effectiveness is often the flip of a coin, that 50% of companies consider themselves effective, and a lot of it has to do with the ability to use and access data and to be able to drive that cross-functional alignment for decision making and really drive data-driven decisions. Often the executive team is more focused on the short term, and within a quarter I can only optimize small amounts of data. But longer term, many of our supply chains are looking over time horizons of multiple quarters with long-term shipments across boundaries. We need to be able to look across those time horizons and to be able to drive optimization. Now, because most companies are struggling with the use of the data models of their systems, 92% of companies are the most dependent on spreadsheets. They have a lot of technologies. They've got ERP, they've got APS, but because the data models don't quite fit their business, they rely on Excel spreadsheets. And so Ames provides a model that can be retrofitted to be on top of your advanced planning systems, or to be able to be used in parallel to be able to drive value. And one of the things we find is that when companies are good at sales and operations planning, or have a good center of excellence, or have the ability to manage visibility, that they are able to drive higher levels of value. And this measures price to tangible book, but also market capitalization. So it does matter. So the question I have for people on the call today, is it time to take a different path? Is it time to blow up those Excel spreadsheets, to think about analytics as we think about time horizons, to think about the fit of the data models, to really sit back and say, what can optimization do for your business? So Christian, I love your case study. I want you to tell people about how you used analytics to make a difference.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, back in 2014, we noticed that the market was really starting to change, and we needed to take control of basically what the demand and what we can do with the supply of what we have as ships that are trading around globally. we have been operating and carrying cars for quite some time, and it was in 1969 that we started getting purposely built ships to carry cars. Now, in the beginning, the market was relatively stable with having less dynamics. It was basically exports from Asia and exports from the US and exports from Europe going in one direction, and you can easily set up trade routes and fill up the ships accordingly. Now, after the Lehman crisis in 2009, 2010, things started getting a little bit more complicated, and we did notice that our customers were production lines and also the market getting more fragmented. So they were quickly changing, and that meant that we also quickly had to change. Based on the changes, we need to make sure that we employ our vessels within our 12 global trades and make sure that they are employed with little to no downtime, and that we keep them active trading in these global trades that we all have set up in these systems here, as you can see. And here you see that what we took was, we initially had inputs being put into Excel spreadsheets, and we also had an access data model. These models we wanted to incorporate into a more tactical planning tool. And Ames was the vendor that we went with. And what we did is that we created 4 modules, one with the long-term forecast, one with a short-term forecast, and one with the business model, which drives also the budget modeling that we do, and also the tonnage allocation, which ensures that all our ships are allocated into the various trades that you saw on the previous slides. What we see that we have been able to do is that we have been looking at a strategic level, 1 to 5 year, and also on a tactical level, 0 to 12 months. And we are also starting to dip into the operational planning as well. And with the various planning that we do, we have managed to get the budgeting done in record time. We've also been able to get all types of alerts and notifications letting us know that a ship is employed in the right trade at the right time. And we can see if there's anything on the horizon that may occur, and with the appropriate alerts put towards this kind of view. And we also have an optimization option where we can make Ames work and show us what optimally where the ships should be employed. And here where we see that we are getting a little view on the daily planning screen that we have in Ames, where it basically shows all the ships on the left-hand side and where they are being employed, which trade. And various alerts and notifications are being done, such as geographical verifications, speed and specifications alert, availability notifications, if there's a vessel that we can charter out, or if we need to charter in another vessel. It also shows an idle vessel filter so that we can see that we can minimize the idle days that we were to have on a ship. And we also have a docking list, missing filter, ownership filter, and etc. This here brings back to one of the most benefits, or the biggest benefit that we've seen so far, and that has been with the idle vessel filter, and also seeing that we are employing vessels optimally. And for just as a quick sample, one of the KPIs that we are establishing is that if we do notice that 1% change, an improvement on our vessel utilization, or fleet utilization, sorry, we do see that has or equates to about $3 million US of savings per year. And as I was saying, that we do have this strategic planning that we do, and we are also now dipping into operational planning. And as you can see with our latest vessels, the complexity is just getting greater. So we do want to see what more we can do with Ames as a tool for optimization, and how we can optimally get our vessels filled and also sail to make sure that they are as full as possible and have as little idle time as possible in their sailing schedules. So the future will be looks bright with the possible solution that we're looking at with Ames.
So let me ask you some questions. How did you find Ames?
Well, we did have help with an external supplier that typically scans market for various solutions, and we were looking for an optimization module or software. And we did get a list of potential vendors, and we did go through a pretty thorough RFP round. And Ames popped up to be the best one, and I will never forget the words that was said and kind of sealed the deal, and that was fit for purpose. And that's really what we found with Ames, is that their program, their software, fit perfectly with what we were looking for.
You know, and a lot of times people will implement software and their planners have been using spreadsheets and they don't want to really move to a more rigid or, you know, focused optimization program. How did you make the transition and deal with the change management issues?
Yeah, it's not easy, because it seems to be that the love for Excel is never ending, and people do love the flexibility that Excel has. But we had built these models that we had. I mean, they were really massive Excel sheets, and just the business continuity, if things were to go wrong, I mean, it would be really tough to problem solve. And it was really kind of a business risk having this type of information and using Excel for that purpose. So we wanted to have something that was more rigid, and also something that provides more security. And that was one of the reasons, and one of the big wins in the business case that we had for doing this.
And did you find people adapted, or did you have to train them or get new talent? How did you actually build the team?
It was definitely an adaptive process. And basically, we have, you know, we're a good-sized company, but the users are small for the Ames tool. So we had all the users that were involved in the project from day one. And that helped a lot with getting the business understanding into the software, and also making sure that the users were basically being trained while the project was ongoing.
And how long did it take?
Well, we had a prototype up relatively quickly, and it was a big project. It took a total year to get everything online, but we had the budget, the business model was completed within 8 months, and we did our first budgeting that first year with the software. So that was good, and being the size and just being 6 people in total, I think that was quite an achievement.
Yeah, I agree. And what would you tell other people that are thinking about doing this, people on the call? What would you tell them? What would be your advice?
Get the business involved as soon as possible. It's imperative that the business really gets what they need, and that it's business driven rather than IT driven. That was the key for our success.
Yeah, you know, getting those business leaders involved early and really getting that alignment and vision is, you know, it's easier said than done, right? You know, but it's so critical. So I want to go back and Chris, I know you've been working at Ames now, and tell us a little bit about, you know, your response to the case study, and you know, what your lessons have been, you know, working at Ames. A little bit about your software and the deployment model. Is this a typical case study for you, or what are you finding?
Thanks, Laura. We see we essentially see 2 implementation routes. So we see implementation routes where our customers take on a partner and then have the partner help them and also transfer skills. And then we've got organizations that have built their own center of excellence or skills in-house, and are able to get up and running relatively quickly with Ames and deploy a number of applications. I guess our biggest, most experienced users are deploying multiple applications every quarter. So it's kind of a broad range, and it's driven largely from the skills that are available in the workforce of our clients. And there are some industries like oil and gas where they've got quite a depth of skills, and they've been doing optimization related supply chain initiatives for many decades.
Well, one of the things we were talking about in the case study is the change management, the ability to get teams onboarded and deal with training and online, visualization and helping teams out. How are you tackling that at Ames, and what have you learned?
Yeah, so we've learned a lot, and particularly over the last couple of years. So typically, when a new client starts out at Ames, then we start off with a 2 or 3 day proof of concept workshop. And it's got the stakeholders in the room, and the stakeholders are the functional leadership, executive, IT, and data stewardship. And what we do is we together build a functional design. So most of our clients know what they're trying to do anyway, but are kind of frustrated with technology. And then we basically open Ames and we build from scratch an application. And we've learned this is really successful because all of the stakeholders know exactly what's in the application. So that our work is projected, so the team can see what's in the application, so they can trust it. And the other thing is there's a lot of flexibility on the UI side, and that allows them to get the kind of look and feel of a tool that they want to become familiar with, and it's something that they really recognize. So that early involvement in what's effectively like a 2 or 3 day boot camp really helps adoption.
And where are you headed in the future? Any words that you can share with the team?
Yeah, we see that there's 2 big challenges out there. So we've got hundreds of applications deployed out there, but it should really be a lot more. And one of the challenges there is from a supply chain perspective, there's quite a lot of skills out there from a descriptive, from a visualization perspective. And there's obviously a lot of Excel skills out there. But stepping up to prescriptive analytics, which is where most of the benefits sit, can be a challenge for organizations. And we're looking to address that challenge in 2 ways. And the first way is we're investing very heavily in our technology, not just to make it better, but also to make it much easier for supply chain teams to use. That's what we're currently very busy with. We've got quite a significant team on that. And then the other thing is from a client side, we're investing heavily into training and training specifically on supply chain analytics. So by Q3 this year, we think we're going to have some adjustments to our technology to make it easier for supply chain teams to develop themselves, but also training as well to take them the other half of that way.
Well, awesome. What questions do we have? Any that we should address before we close today?
We have a couple of questions.
Okay.
We have, we have from Thomas Toff. I hear Ames is quite good for scheduling type problems. How do you use it for strategic horizon? Do you have any examples?
So that's one of the things we see. So a lot of our clients are building applications, and they've got their applications with different horizons. So we see a lot of organizations using it for strategic scheduling for large assets. And Christian, you got a great example of that there. But also organizations are bringing it to a much nearer term horizon. And we've got applications out there that our clients have built very near, so it's almost real-time optimization. And we see this outside of supply chain. We see it in the energy grid in the US, where Ames is optimizing huge assets and pricing at 15-minute intervals, so very close to real-time optimization. And I think one of the big advantages of building this skill set and using Ames is that you're able to really cope with that multi-horizon environment. So not every model needs to be separate. You can have build applications that start off in a strategic context, but really get down to optimization at a very operational level. And some of them are closed loop and they just optimize in the background.
Yeah, I think for our part, I mean, we set up with the 4 different modules in regards to forecasting. So basically, on the long-term forecast and short-term forecast, they are basically inputs to the business model and the tonnage allocation modules. So the business model is the one that goes on the really strategic end, and it has a rolling forecast that's being done, and it goes from 1 year to 5 years. So that's where we can really see the effects of the demand and the fluctuations, and see how the future may look. And you know, it's as close to a crystal ball you can get, I guess, and hopefully we will see better signs in the crystal ball soon, because it's not the best these days. So
it's a tough market right now, right?
It is a tough market, and I guess that's the bad part of Ames, that you actually do see the effects very clearly. But that's how it is. So it gives us some focus on what we need to work on, at least.
All right, we've got another question from Pertusa. Is this going to replace existing tools like APO, TPVS from SAP?
You know, my recommendation is that people use the Ames optimizers to augment the current APO architecture. And the reason is that most people have spent a lot of work bringing the SIF interface down into ERP. And while the optimizers in SAP APO are usually not deep enough, the ability to add optimizers is available in the software. So if you've implemented, you know, an APS tool or, you know, another tool in transportation planning or warehouse management where perhaps the optimization isn't meeting your needs, I would actually bolt on the optimizers from Ames to try to improve it. Now, if you don't have that technology, you might consider having a standalone, particularly if you are a regional team with a small group. If you're a global team, I'm not so sure. So how would Ames answer that question?
Yeah, so we're definitely not here to replace SAP in this particular case. So, but what we believe we do, I very much agree with you that it makes a good add-on. But one of the secondary benefits is if you use Ames in addition to SAP, it allows you to keep SAP more generic, so a lot less customization, and that's obviously where a lot of the costs and the difficulties sit with ERP. So I often see it as an addition to SAP, but also maybe 50% of the time our clients are using it where they've got a very specific problem. It's not really addressed by any of the technologies, and they build it relatively quickly in Ames.
Yeah, you know, and one of the things I see is that a global business has lots of businesses, right? And it's hard to have a generic advanced planning tool to meet all of those needs. And, you know, so I think, you know, this is a way to serve specific business needs and still maintain the IT infrastructure that you've worked so hard on, to be able to add some optimization, to be able to meet the need. I mean, the case study that we were presenting with the scheduling of cars on a ship is pretty unique, right? You know, it's a wonderful case study, but, you know, there are probably less than a handful of people that are doing that in the world. But, you know, in a similar fashion, there are some unique case studies that most businesses have that out-of-the-box advanced planning solutions don't deal with so well. And I think in those cases, I think this is a great bolt-on option. That's my view. Any changes or, you know, debate there?
Not from me, Laura. It's Chris. So yeah, I agree with the way you framed it there. It makes a lot of sense, and that's what we see a lot of our customers doing exactly that.
Yeah, and in fact, the companies that are the best with SAP APO have augmented the optimization. When I talked about that, only 12% of companies are making progress, those that are using SAP APO are using some form of optimization externally. Either they've had really bright professors write some optimization routines that they're calling, or they've augmented the software with specialization, and I think Ames is a good alternative there.
Yeah, so thank you so much to our speakers today. So thanks, Laura and Christian and Chris, and to all of you attending. Appreciate everyone's time today.